Good evening and welcome to the Comprehensive Plan Committee meeting. Tonight is February 7th, 2024. I'm calling this meeting to order and I'd like it known that there is a quorum present. The first order of business tonight is to approve the minutes from our previous meeting, which was January 3rd, 2024. I'd be looking for a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
Second from Greg. And all those in favor? And that passes. Next up on our agenda is public comment. We do have someone here in our audience tonight.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for volunteering to be on this comp committee. It's a long-term involvement with volunteers. I was on the 2004, so I'll try to keep it brief. I've watched a few of the shows.
Real quick, just for case, can you just introduce?
Dennis Morris,
Next up on our agenda
340
is
Cape
public
Road.
comment.
Sorry about that.
Someone has their
We do
TV
have
on.
someone here in our audience tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for volunteering to be on this comp
Yeah,
committee.
I'm trying to get in there. There we go.
Sorry,
Anyway.
Dennis, go ahead.
It's Dennis Morris, 340 Cape Road. And I've got a handout I'll do afterwards. I just figured I'd run over 4 quick things. I've been watching the shows, the live streams and some recordings. I've also saw the presentation from North Star, and I'd just like to make some observation real quickly on some of the comments. The handout, there was mention about traffic on 302 being really bad. And where I live on the Cape Road, it's very obvious. And then when I was fire chief here, we tried to deal with it through the DOT. I'll give you just two quick examples of how bad it is. Once it backs up, those lights that we have, the 2 in the whole town, it backs up past the public safety building, and even as far as the Raymond Cape Road at times. People start to cut down Main Street, and they trigger the monitor on Main Street and 302, and that backs up the traffic further. And even people that I take care of from out of state, they've already figured it out. They just all whip around there. It causes the traffic to slowly back all the way up. We tried to deal with the DOT, and I've even seen where they go through they'll go down to the westbound lane, whip through the public safety driveway and down over the other exit. So it becomes very hazardous all the way around. So I really hope you deal with the traffic lights. And we asked, if both the town manager and I, if they could change the way it operates in the summer, or at least at night. 2:30 in the morning, we'll come back with 2 or 3 trucks from a fire or alarm and sit there at a red light. And they just said, yeah, we like what we have, we're not going to change it. That's basically what happened. So if you would make a mention of that, I think it's huge. It's also ironic that they give us grants for energy efficient appliances, and we're sitting there idling at 2 o'clock in the morning, just polluting the air. So that's my pet peeve. Solar panels, if you do get into energy, there was an offer from Revision for the public safety building to put it on the building at pretty much no cost to the town. We'd have saved thousands and never get any further than the Board of Selectmen. So if that's on the agenda and you're going to talk about it, I would love to see that in your comprehensive plan. The mention from North Star that once you do the plan, stay with it and follow it, and make sure that some of it actually gets implemented into whatever ordinances or whatever's necessary. I have a personal experience from 2004 in that I pushed for the in-law apartment. It was denied by the committee, sent to Augusta. They sent it back, said there's nothing on affordable housing. It went in.
I'm getting no audio on this.
But
I've got it all the way up.
anyway,
I think it's
So,
Frank.
do you
I
want to
didn't put the
hold just for a
video on
second?
'cause I won't want-
Frank, we'll
that's
try
why
to
I
solve
called
that.
Linda.
Is that because we're all on mute, or should he be able to hear us? Like
He should be
Why
able to
is this
hear
from-
us.
because if the studio is
As long as the
unmuted,
studio is
You gotta turn
so
this
because
on to get
everybody hears.
somewhere to
Should
get,
have unmuted out there. I've asked him to unmute. That's why Frank can't hear. Bill, can you hear me? Can you unmute the studio?
One
The
of them.
studio is unmuted.
Thank you.
on
Frank, can
my
you
phone,
hear us
is
now?
it?
No, it's not unmuted.
Might be.
No, it isn't. The symbol is still crossed off.
Okay, hold on.
Oh. Something's going on.
There, now you're unmuted. Frank, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that.
all right,
Sorry, Dennis.
back onto the in-law apartments. I was pretty proud that when they sent it back, that committee called me up and said, could you come back and explain what you tried to get us to do? It was reduced down from 850 to 700, I think, but it still went through, and that appeased the state for our effort at affordable housing. It's been now diluted down in a big way, and I talked to Chris Hansen about this, and I guess it's going to be dealt with in, hopefully in the planning board, I believe. But anyway, I'll be there to speak on that too. It takes away quite a few rights of anyone in the waterfront zoning. For example, everything on the Cape Road and Deep Cove, no matter how far away from the water is, they have to have double the land. Without getting into a lot of details, it's in there. It's just something I believe should be revisited. I watched a show when Greg said that he thought that the annual town meeting was important. I happen to agree 100%. That public safety building wouldn't be there if it wasn't for town meetings, annual public, open town meetings where people can question. I had a select board that wasn't supportive of it, but we got it into the town meeting, and we were able to go through the process and get that building built. It's part of the transparency that we've lost. They just recently voted to stay at the secret ballot and to avoid not to do the open town meeting. I think last select board meeting. Especially when anything's going to be $1 million or more for a CIP, something that's going to extend into not only everyday taxes but long-term taxes. It gives you a chance to ask questions and find out what the reasoning is, and also to be able to understand why it's a matter. So, again, more details in that handout, but I really think Greg is on the money, and I can't say enough about it. And the last thing is Jordan Small School is coming up in 2027, I believe. Plus, a good friend of mine, and I've helped her with the land, has offered to work with the town to convert or sell the corner of Main Street, the old Brown estate. I guess it's Capo now. And she offered it for maybe a way to advance the village into make a park out of it and utilize it for the town. Of course, that would take CIP money too. So going back to what North Star said, and that is, if you have things on your plan that will take capital improvement money, I suggest you stay active and pay attention to the budget committee and the select board meetings, because sometimes they go really quickly. I think this year we have 4 meetings and it's done. And I think that's pretty much it. Traffic, in-law, school. I think that's it. Anyway, those things I think are important enough for me to come up and mainly just to say thank you for doing it, because I know this is a long-term situation and not a lot of people show up to give you their input, and not many surveys come in. But I went through the process, and I'll tell you, I waited before I came here to see which way you were headed. Very impressed with everyone. I think you guys actually have our committee beat all the pieces, so, and I think you have a great group that you've hired. If I need quick questions, I know she's got a full agenda. I said 10 to 15, but she said 10, so. But I will leave these handouts, which have more details of what I just talked about. Thanks for your time.
Excellent.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you
info.
very much for being involved, and coming here tonight.
I'll even close the door. You know, the energy thing.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
Frank, I can email the handout to you tomorrow, so you'll have it.
Great.
I'm sorry?
I just told Frank that I can email him
Oh,
the handout.
okay, sorry.
It's all me.
Thank you. All right, next is old business. I was hoping that we could have a recap and some initial results from our workshop, which I want to thank everybody for their efforts. I love to say tickled that so many people showed up. I think it was an excellent idea to pair it with basketball. That brought in a lot of people. In fact, I think we had the most people during the basketball hours. The first workshop was a success. I was not there for that part, but I heard it was well attended. So I'm just very happy that it went off as well as it did, and I look forward to our next workshop.
Yeah, I just want to, Sam's going to give you all some initial results from the workshop and from the online survey, which we also got a decent number of responses to. We'll have a full report for you probably in another week or so. So this is just initial results. But before that, I just want to thank everyone again. I don't know, we don't usually get like 100% volunteer support from a committee for these sorts of things. So you all are awesome, and everyone was super helpful and just jumped in and did what needed to be done. And we really appreciate it. I think it was really successful. One other thing, before I forget, at the end of the day, we brought home to North Star a bunch of coloring books and colored pencils and stuff, and I don't know where they came from or if someone wants them back.
I think I brought those. I don't need them back, but
Okay, I can bring them back if you want them. Otherwise, we will use them in future workshops.
you keep them and bring them to your next one. Yeah.
I'll ask you about that later. Yeah, so Sam, if you go to Zoom and share your screen,
I think I have it set for you.
Yeah, so Sam's just gonna give us a quick recap.
On a cold winter's day in January in Raymond, residents gathered inside the Jordan Small Middle School to watch basketball games. As the sound of bouncing balls echoed across the gym floors, a distinctive smell wafted in from the other room. That smell was the very scent of fresh buttery popcorn and powdery rich donuts. People followed that smell all the way to that room where they found themselves looking at maps of their town and answering questions about what they wanted the future of Raymond to look like in terms of transportation, housing, and community needs. Children drew pictures of where they lived and placed dots on maps. Young parents wrote concerns regarding opportunities and access at schools, and older adults reflected on the need for better transportation options. Though initially people came to the middle school to watch basketball, they remained in that room where the workshop took place because they had the opportunity to reflect upon key issues in town and engage in a space with fellow community members. The CompPlan workshop received a wide variety of responses from people of all different age ranges. In total, there were 64 people in attendance, including all 9 committee members. The online survey received 57 responses. The following slides summarize the results of that workshop, as well as the input received online. Much of Raymond's economic development in the 18th and 19th century revolved around the lakes, mainly Sebago Lake, which provided hydropower for mill industries. Over time, these lakes became an important source of recreation and summer tourism for the town. Camps, lodges, and inns were built along the town's waterfront. Today, these lakes and other natural resources are an important part of Raymond's identity, but are under threat, especially from increased shorefront property development and other environmental issues. People want to see increased protections around existing natural areas, especially surrounding the lakes and ponds. In thinking about the future land use plan, these places to protect and preserve could be looked at as both rural, which are areas that should be protected from development, or possibly even critical rural, which are areas that deserve the highest protection and usually consist of connecting trails, conservation areas, and unfragmented habitats. Moving on into the 20th century, increased automobile traffic resulted in highway construction, such as Route 302. Route 302 developed as a commercial strip and today is a primary commuter corridor for those leaving town for work to meet their daily needs. Much of Raymond's existing restaurants, stores, and markets are located on the stretch of 302 and Main Street. The future land use plan requires that the town designate a growth area, which is where most new developments such as housing and new businesses will be directed. Growth areas will also be places for new infrastructure like sidewalks, road improvements, and public utilities. People want to retain Main Street and the village area as a place for growth and development in town. Both the responses for conservation areas and for growth demonstrate more of the status quo where people want to conserve places already conserved and grow where there is already growth. Though Route 302 made it possible for people to travel and commute between towns, The result of daily traffic has increased, especially in the summer months. The section of Route 302 and Main Street are the only places in town with sidewalks, yet people still do not feel safe walking or biking on these roads due to the limited crosswalks and adjacent speeding traffic. The need for alternative transportation is a priority in town, as most people cannot get anywhere without driving. Additionally, much of the roads in the northern part of town are quite narrow with many blind corners, and generally are not well connected to encourage bicycle and pedestrian activity, such as Egypt Road highlighted here. Over time, as the population of Raymond grew, so did its seasonal visitors. Roughly 30% of Raymond's population is seasonal, which equates roughly to 10 to 12,000 residents, most of whom either travel from out of state to attend camps or own lakefront property off Raymond Cape Road. The need for gathering spaces, especially for year-round residents, is imperative. Community connections, such as a developed downtown area and Main Street with gathering places for people to meet their daily needs, could foster a greater sense of community and transform Raymond into a place to stay rather than a place to leave. Raymond's population is diverse and unique, and these different voices should have equal opportunity to be heard at public meetings, calling for a need of community representation, which is the third bar here. Because summer camps are often exclusive to summer residents, there is a need for more summer opportunities for year-round residents, which could include either scholarships for camps or the use of schools for camps in the summer. Most people leave town to work and meet their daily needs. The larger grocery stores, jobs, business facilities, and services are found in nearby towns like Windham. There are limited restaurants, small businesses, and grocery stores in Raymond, other than what currently exists between Route 302 and Main Street. Raymond has limited community facilities and services and limited staff to support these needs. Even though Raymond's median age is 47.8, which is older than the county and the state, and has seen an increase in people aged 65 and over, the town is also experiencing growth in young families with school-aged children who are moving to town. These age ranges are reflected in the above responses, showing the need for school services, adult classes, and then senior and disability services. Not only do people want to see services for senior citizens and older adults, they also want to see better services for schools and more recreation opportunities for children, as well as adult education classes. Like most communities in Maine, housing affordability is an issue in Raymond. According to Maine State Housing Authority, Raymond's median home price has increased by about 75% between 2010 and 2022. 62% of households are unable to afford the median home, and the affordability index has declined from 0.87 in 2010 to 0.77 in 2022. Compared to surrounding communities in the Lakes region, housing in Raymond is slightly more affordable. Surrounding towns have seen increases in median home prices of over 130% within the last 10 years, and even lower housing affordability indexes. Though people generally want to see diverse housing types in Raymond, most still want to see traditional single-family homes. This leads to more questions of what the future of single-family housing could look like in town. Should the town think about reducing the lot size and clustering homes to preserve more open space? Should Raymond still prioritize the need for affordable housing, even though housing costs are lower than surrounding towns? The primary transportation system concerns in Raymond are lack of sidewalks and connected bike and pedestrian infrastructure, lack of public transportation, and transportation options for older adults. Sidewalks in Raymond are restricted to Main Street and Route 302 in the commercial and village zones. The RTP Lakes Region bus also no longer stops in town. A lack of public transportation places a strain on commuters, especially those who live in Raymond but work in other towns. According to ACS data, around 70% of residents in the labor force drove to work alone. Reflected most in this chart is the need for a variety of transportation services to meet different user groups, both seasonal and year-round, as well as both young and old. Unfortunately, as in life, all good things eventually must end. The workshop wrapped up Those lingering took their last look at the spreadsheets and maps as kids came running in and out to grab more donuts and popcorn. As people walked back to their cars, they left inspired with more questions than answers, just like the smell of buttered popcorn that always leaves you coming back for more. And there will be more. This is just the first step, or the appetizer. The entree, as in the future land use workshop, is still to come.
Great.
So,
Excellent.
Thank you, Sam, for your riveting storytelling.
Great.
Did you bring any popcorn?
I did not
know,
bring
you
popcorn. Yeah.
We also wanted to make sure you all had time to share your experience or anything from the workshop that stood out to you or that you wanted to talk about. So,
Does anybody have any comments?
Definitely met a couple folks that were, or I should say, one or two that were pretty interested in becoming engaged in committees or other opportunities to volunteer. The challenge was they were there for basketball with first or second or fifth graders, and so their time availability was pretty limited for the foreseeable future. I encouraged them that hang in there and times will change and kids will be around less, and the town would benefit from their enthusiasm to join a committee or a board. That's the complete story. Sam's story.
Well, I learned where the bypass is going through. Chris talked about it, but I didn't really connect the dots where it was going, so the map showed that, and I had a good discussion with some people about the bypass.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, on the bypass?
The bypass, well, one of the thoughts I had, I think it would come out near Mill Street, and I don't know what the Mill Street people would think about people running through Mill Street and back onto Main Street. That might be an issue. Is that right, Chris? Is it, where
Well,
was?
there's no definitive plan.
I know,
The
but,
idea would be Wyndham bringing it up to the town line where the old landfill was up on
Yeah.
Patricia Avenue at the top of the hill. That side is pretty much owned by 2 or 3 people, and that's it. Mostly Grondin's, where the pit is. So the bypass may come in from Enterprise Drive, which is the street that's across from, there's a couple of commercial buildings, A+ Autos down in there, and then the dugout right there, and then it would come up through to the Patricia Avenue site, and then from there, there's quite a bit of property to get down to 85, whether it's in front of Mill Street or further north up by, a little further up. That would be dependent on, who's interested in selling or not, and how much interest the town has in that activity. But that would be the idea. And the couple of things that are have been done is where Honey Hill has been developed with the 12 duplexes in one single-family house recently. There is a connector that could go up to Patricia. There's water up there already and power. So if Wyndham brought water up their side of it and we hooked together, that would mean you'd have water, power, and possibly if we go anywhere with broadband, maybe broadband could come up through there. I've always seen it, and we've talked about it for 15 years, that would be a great area to kind of reinvent a downtown of Raymond and Wyndham together and do general development. But I think it's just recently in the last 5 years got some headway in Wyndham. They've done their 2 little bypasses that they're going to do or approve them, and then in their 10-year plan, that was next. So that's what I can tell you about Wyndham, and I can tell you that the town of Raymond has always been interested in talking about it, but it just hasn't materialized.
Could you go into more detail on what the bypass for Raymond actually would be, or what's been talked about in the past?
As in, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, I know what a bypass is, but I don't really
Well,
know
what it would do is it would take traffic off from 302, which Dennis Morse was just speaking to. And if you're traveling north on 302, for instance, in the summertime, you know it's backed up. You know, you're going to have a half-hour wait from Wyndham to get to Raymond. So you get on to Enterprise Drive. It's a back road, a secondary road, not a 302 size highway. And then you'd go up through there, and there may be, you know, who knows what'll get developed in there, but maybe some housing, maybe some commercial districts, maybe some off-the-road shopping malls, similar to what happened over in North Conway. I'm just giving you kind of a vision of what's been discussed. And then you get up to the Raymond line, you come down over the hill, and the same thing into Raymond. And it would really benefit people going to Gray. You wouldn't have to come all the way up 302 into Raymond and take the right onto 85 to get into Gray. You could take end up on 85 from Enterprise. Same thing, people going south to Wyndham from Gray, or coming off, you know, from up Route 26. It would just make another avenue and take a lot of the pressure off. And it would allow, he also mentioned not a lot of people want to walk and cross 302. It's a tough road to cross in the summertime with the traffic. If you had a secondary road and you had it more accessible to the public, we could have more walking and more, you know, shops that you can stop and visit without endangering your life trying to get in and out of 302. Does that help?
Yeah, no, that helps.
I'd be, oh, go ahead, Peter.
Sure, just a question for Chris. That's village, rural residential?
Right now, it's village residential, so that's our densest zone.
That is, in fact, even though I'll talk a little bit later about our impending legislation, 2003, but also that is the designated, as best I can determine, growth area.
Yes.
Which is, from what I understand, key to the interpretation of that legislation. But I will tell you, I guess I'll say it now, I have not found anywhere, and I have asked the planning board this as well, if we have a designated growth area.
We'll talk about that soon.
Okay. because I don't find it anywhere, and hopefully you have. But a lot of that would then, as far as the development there, would go right in line with where we want to see growth. Correct?
Yes.
If it's a designated
Absolutely.
growth area.
And you know, the whole thing about a growth area is having that growth near services, so people don't have to travel great distances to get to a restaurant or a shop or a coffee shop or whatever your needs are. Right now, everybody gets on 302 and flies down to Wyndham, and you know that's the problem. Is we don't have a road that is developed in a way that was planned so that you can have all these things.
Right.
But we have the opportunity.
And it's in proximity of water as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And so then really the only thing you need is sewers. And maybe talking, 25, 50 years from now, but.
Well, I think it's going to be sooner than that, and I don't mean to jump all over it, but Wyndham has some small septic sewer systems that are going in their bypass areas, and what they do is they collect the waste, send it to a facility where it's processed right on site, and then they put it back in the groundwater. It's called the irrigation drip system. And they have these little these wells all along the roads where the water goes right back in, and it's called potable water. We wouldn't want to drink it, but it's very close to potable water. And the byproducts are burned for energy. So it's a very efficient system. It was developed by Gates way back. But Wyndham's doing that. And if they do that, I guess Bridgeton has a small one as well. So it may be something, particularly with that tie-in, we tie into one of Wyndham's or we create our own. It's, that's realistic. It could happen.
I'd be interested to see a traffic study on how much we think it would alleviate traffic on 302. I mean, I know it would drive business to the bypass area if it was well developed, but I'm just curious. I don't know about anyone else's experience driving in the summer and where you live, but it's a long wait from White Bridges Road for me to 85, and then it is clear sailing. I am not met with any traffic. So I think a lot of the traffic is still just heading up 302 towards Casco, Naples, the Cape.
Yeah.
You know, but I would be curious to know how much traffic it might alleviate.
And the bottleneck is at the bridge, right by Good Life Deli.
Yes,
That's
it is.
the bottleneck,
It is.
because it goes right down to 2 lanes.
Yep.
I'd be interested just to have an excuse just to put a light there. I mean, it's completely dead in the wintertime, but like once the ice cream dugout is in full swing, that road is, it's nightmarish with people trying to cross over 302.
Yeah, just coming out from ice cream. Yeah.
Just from ice cream.
Just from ice cream.
Because right now back there is just the, it's Wyndham's dump, but or it's their
It's like
brush
a
dump and
brush
stuff
hill
like that.
or-
Yeah, and then a couple other.
So actually, Wyndham is working on that light. That's a state road, so they have to have so many trips a day to trigger a light. And because of the developments down there have increased, it's close, very close. But I don't believe they've tripped it yet. That is something they've been talking about for the last 3 years, putting a light there.
More ice cream trips, guys.
Yeah, I even go for ice cream whenever I see that line getting out there. That's what
Because if we keep going, we might trip it.
I think one piece of the bypass that would be an important design consideration would be having it be laid out such that it doesn't turn into a bypass for folks trying to get down towards Naples.
You mean a raceway?
And coming through to 85 and going up to 11 or Plains Road to get over to Naples. So if it was a kind of a village experience or with some shops and commercial back there, that would help slow that down. For speedsters that might think they could do better just going through the new bypass.
I like it.
Any other comments regarding the workshop?
I thought it was really refreshing to get feedback from people, to be talking to people and get opinions in real time as opposed to just talking to each other and speculating as to what we all want to do and hoping that it's a good reflection of the town. So very energizing. It was great to talk to people. If anybody's listening, please come talk to us more.
Peter?
Yeah, just in the slide with places for growth and development, I saw there was a column for Wyndham.
Yes.
I thought that was interesting.
It made us chuckle a little bit, but there were a significant number of people in the survey and also who put post-it notes who said Wyndham for where the town should see growth.
I guess you could categorize that in another way, but that's a pretty neutral way to do it.
I mean, I think it does connect to the fact that most people in Raymond go to Wyndham for your daily needs and services, and to some degree that's okay. You know, this plan might not say that you should be able to meet every single daily need in Raymond. You know, Wyndham's gonna have your big box stores and those sorts of things.
That's what that was.
Okay. I think we can move on to our budget request. Thank you, John, for all the work you put into this that I may or may not understand any more than I did our last meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Would you like to give a quick rundown?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I did it 2 different ways, which is why there's 2 columns. So they will essentially tell you the same thing, and it's one just a check, but also I just wanted to make sure I was thinking about it correctly. So what did make it a little confusing is that the 2 lines highlighted in yellow, you know, obviously one is an overage from the 2022-2023 fiscal year, and I guess that's already been taken care of, so we don't have to count that against anything. That hole was already filled. And then we projected out essentially the remaining invoices through June of this year, which would take us to the end of the 23-24 fiscal year. and it looked like we have an overage there as well. And my understanding is that that overage will be paid from the TIF fund, if I believe that's correct.
That's correct.
So we don't necessarily need to account for that in our 24-25 budget. Is that accurate?
Yeah, your budgeting is one of the few that it's going to be what it's going to be. I mean, if you needed to go way over for some reason, then we'd want to take a number back to the select board. But as long as you're staying within the North Star contract, that total number is already expected, and it's ear tagged for the TIF. So.
Okay. So if that's the case, which it sounds like we're good, in that first kind of section, you'll see kind of the second gray line, which says required for North Star is this 24,000. So that essentially, we've paid 49,000 to date out of the 96,000. We're gonna pay 25,000. That's our estimate through June of this year, and that'll leave a remaining amount of 24,000, which that essentially is the North Star portion of what we should be requesting for 24-25. And then below that are 4 line items that, you know, we should discuss, which would be kind of like the other items for our budget requests. So we've got the incidentals, which we had talked about. We said we would, for discussion purposes, just throw in 10% of the contract. And you'll notice that that is 10% of the remaining contract as of today, not 10% of the remaining contract as of July 1st, 2024. So I think, you know, there could be an adjustment there. The other line item, the allocation for the mailer, we've got an example that we went over last meeting, which North Star brought up, that they had a town of a similar size. They did 1 mailer, and that cost was about $3,500. We also discussed yard signs, which Peter did get me some numbers for. So it's, you know, for 25 signs at $720 a sign, plus an H stake plus tax, that's just over $500. And then I just threw rounding in there to make this an easy discussion purpose, so $39 for rounding. So, you know, in my mind, the 24,000 for North Star is, you know, a definite part of that. And I think, you know, I think the incidentals, the mailer, the yard signs, and, you know, the rounding, I think, is insignificant. But, you know, those bigger 3 other items, I think those are things we should talk about and figure out what we would like to include in our request. But if we did include them as they stand on the sheet, our total ask would be $33,200.
So what is broken down in this incidentals budget? What are the types of costs that we'd be looking at?
My guess is things like we provided food for the January 20th workshop. So sort of those unexpected kind of things that come up that we might want to spring for. And I think it gives us a little bit more leeway for mailing or outreach or paid Facebook ads, or I guess that's what I envision incidentals being used for. Oh, and just so we have a reference point, I did not spend more than $200 on donuts and coffee for our workshop. Thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, I guess if I'm understanding this, John, the budget 24-25, we would need an additional $33,200.
Yeah. Well, if we took this as is, yes.
Okay.
But I think, you know, in my mind, talking through the incidentals and the mailer are the 2 big of those other things, and the yard signs. Those are the 3 items where I think,
sure, And I would say, you know, I would be all in favor of funding those. If we don't use them, we just use that money, it goes back to the general fund, correct?
It goes back into the TIF.
To
yeah.
the TIF.
Or stay in the TIF.
Yeah, so, you know, and we're not talking about, I mean, overall, we're not talking about a huge sum of money. So, I mean, that would be my recommendation.
I think if everybody feels comfortable with the amount of $33,200 that we would be asking Sue, I believe, to request on our behalf from the select board, then I think we can go ahead and have a motion for that. I feel comfortable with the incidentals and the amount for the mailer and having that a little bit of a cushion, because this is, as we had said in the last meeting, our last opportunity to fund this committee while we're all still here.
This is it, yeah.
Yeah.
60.
And I do think we'll probably want to do more rather than less outreach throughout the community in this last kind of final push as well.
Yeah.
And if we do 2 mailers, you know, that's a big portion of that incidentals budget as well versus 1, or, you know, Facebook advertising.
And I, for one, do not know how much Facebook advertisement costs. Does anybody have an idea?
It's very inexpensive.
Okay.
You can run an ad for like 2 weeks and it may cost $50 or $50, and it gets the vicinity.
Okay.
But I think, I think there could be other opportunities for engagement as we get closer to having a plan draft and having people talk about it, especially with, you know, making sure you're on the town meeting schedule and all that kind of stuff, so.
I'm on board with this number. I feel like it gives us the flexibility to like ramp things up a little bit if need be, to get the participation levels that we want to have.
I've got no objections to it. I like it.
So I would move that we accept for budget year 2024, 2025 for the comprehensive plan, the sum of the sum of $33,200.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second?
And all those in favor? Frank, can you hear us? Oh, thank you. Okay, unanimous. Thank you. All right.
Nice work, John.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, anytime.
All right, next we have our next workshop, which is all about future land use.
All right, move that towards me now. I will share my screen now. So there we go. So our next workshop, which is coming up in March, is future land use. Just to give you kind of an idea of where we are in the plan, we're over probably about 60% through the budget and through the timeline. But so we've done the inventory chapters, which is a huge chunk of that, the vision statement and data work in the workshop we just did. And now we're at future land use. And after future land use, we're really transitioning. We've been looking back and looking at where Raymond has been and what Raymond is like today. We're really going to start transitioning into what we want Raymond to be like in the future. So this is kind of the fun part, maybe. I think so. Yeah, I'm going to give you a quick overview of what future land use planning is and what we have to do by state statute. The short overview of the sort of internal process is that we're going to do an overview today. We will dedicate probably most of the next meeting to talking about future land use and planning for that March workshop. And then we have a workshop scheduled at the Public Safety Building on March, it's a Tuesday, 19th?
The 19th, yeah.
Yes.
6 to 8.
Yep, so we will do, I think, sort of the nitty-gritty planning for that at the next meeting, but we're going to start by just kind of explaining to you what this whole process is. So a future land use plan in a comp plan consists of a map and a written narrative. And a way to think about future land use is it's kind of taking your vision statement and putting it on a map. So it's taking all these community vision and values that we heard about and figuring out how those things apply to geography and land use. However, a future land use plan is not a zoning map. It's not really regulatory. It's meant to guide future town decisions. And by state statute, you have to designate growth areas and rural areas. But there's kind of a spectrum of designations you can make, spanning from critical rural, which are areas that need the most protection from impacts of development, to growth. And a growth area, don't necessarily think of growth area as like building giant things. It means the area where most change and investment will be focused, where like infrastructure might be appropriate, where town facilities might be appropriate. And you kind of have a spectrum of designations that you can choose from. So rural, things that need to be protected, open spaces, farms, undeveloped blocks of land. Growth is where we want to see investment and where we want to see change, infrastructure, facilities. And then you have the option of also having transition areas, which are kind of places that are, they're not the focused growth area, but they also don't need as much protection as a rural area. So does anybody have any questions at this point?
I just want to let you know, Frank, if you do have a question, since I can't see you, just unmute yourself and make your presence known. Peter.
Yeah, so as I alluded to earlier, it seems like that a lot of the statutory requirements the state's going to impose on municipalities in July is basically pivots on or is determined by a designated growth area.
Guess what my next slide is, Frank.
Okay.
LD 2003 implications. So this is kind of a new thing, starting for towns like Raymond in June. The future land use plan will have a little bit of regulatory power, which is that your growth areas and your rural areas determine what the LD 2003 land use implications are. That means in a growth area, a lot without a dwelling unit on it can have 4 dwelling units, and a lot with a dwelling unit on it can have 2 additional dwelling units. And in a rural area, a lot without a dwelling unit on it can have 2 dwelling units. This is going to be highly dependent on Raymond's land use code and on the content, which I'm not super familiar with, because all your dimensional standards, all your town codes, your sewer requirements, your well requirements, all that stuff still applies. This is just a base density. So if you have a 5 acre per dwelling unit lot size in a rural area, that means to have those 2 dwelling units, you're going to need 10 acres. All that stuff still applies. But this does impact in a growth area, say I don't know what Raymond's Village zoning is actually off the top of my head right now, but you'd have to allow someone to build 4 dwelling units if they had the acreage to do so. You wouldn't be able to say only 2 units in the village. Does that make sense?
So I just want to say this in a way that applies to our acreage. Most of our, I would say like the majority of Raymond is in a 2 to 3 acre zone?
Excuse me?
Is the majority of Raymond in a 2 or 3 acre, like the
Yes.
majority, right?
For the rural districts, yes.
Okay, so that would mean that if there's already a dwelling on there, and let's say, they would have to have 4 to 6 acres in generally to do this to.
It depends how your zoning is written, whether it's written as minimum lot size or as minimum density, which I don't totally know. But yeah,
I believe we're minimum lot size.
Okay.
Okay. Peter?
Okay, so I'll ask this in a way that maybe everyone can understand it. So, as I interpret the statute, basically, the designated growth area within a municipality is going to drive the regulations involving density. My understanding is that the way it's worded in the legislation, there's one of two ways that the state's going to accept a designated growth area. One is that if it's in the comprehensive plan and it states where those zones are. And in fact, if you don't have it mentioned in your comprehensive plan, and correct me if I'm wrong, then the state can decide if you have sewers and water and roads in a particular area, they're going to call that the growth area. Is that my understanding correct there?
So it's whether either a growth area as designated in a future land use plan, or
of the comprehensive.
Yes. Or someone could propose a growth area development if they have the utilities to support that. So that would typically mean roads, sewer, and water infrastructure.
Right.
In theory, a developer could come in and say, I'm going to build an advanced wastewater high-density septic system, therefore I have the utilities to make a growth area development in a place.
Sure.
I think...
And then they would have to convince the state that that's acceptable.
And I think that kind of stuff is probably going to get hammered out in courts.
Yeah.
Or in more rulemaking, but that's the basic
But for now,
idea.
basically, those are the two ways.
Yep.
And it really is dealing with density, as you talk about up here. Because one of the individuals at the workshop was very interested in talking with me about, and I think they raised the question about lot sizes.
Mm-hmm.
And changing lot sizes. And my understanding is there's nothing about lot sizes really mandated in LD 2003. It's all about density.
Mm-hmm.
So that, having said all that, and hopefully I'm not taking too much time, but my question is, have you found anything in your review that documents either of those two conditions in Raymond to this point? A designated growth area.
Yeah, so Peter, it's like you saw my presentation already.
Sure.
You're predicting all my slides. So according to the Raymond 2004 plan didn't have a traditional future land use map. It just showed a zoning map. But in the text there, it says that the areas that are growth areas are the zones VRI, C, and I, which I have tried to outline in bright green.
Yep.
In this clipped map here. And that everything else in town is rural. So that was written in the text. So that is sort of what the 2004 future land use plan was. And to my knowledge, it was accepted by the state. But our goal is to make a map that's gonna look a little different. We're not gonna use the zoning map.
Correct. And I guess that was part of my concern, is that, because I've seen this, and that is a zoning map. Mm-hmm. And you just talked about how the fact that that's not really acceptable, a zoning map. So I guess I would say at this point in time, what could be challenged is that we have not identified a growth area to satisfy the statute.
I would leave that up to the people at the state who certify the comp plans, but I think it was certified, so they accepted this in writing as zones VRI, C, and I are growth areas in 2004. I think the reason why we don't like to use a zoning map is because this map is intended to guide your zoning. So if you if you base it on a zoning map, then that doesn't really help you if you're going to make changes to that zoning map.
Sure. I had an opportunity to talk with the planning board and ask specifically where they felt the designated growth area was, and I was told that they don't have a designated growth area, and that one of the things that the planning board was trying to do at one point was to avoid overlays.
Overlay districts?
Yes. And so one of the things that they were hesitant of doing was actually designating a growth area for the town of Raymond. So, and I don't want to belabor this other than the fact that I believe in the map and in the language of going forward with writing this chapter on land use. We should make every attempt to clarify that, make it a little bit clearer so that there's no question as to what our designated growth areas are.
I'm just going to add a comment, and I don't know the answer to this, but I'll check. Peter, you remember we had a growth management ordinance in our land use ordinance?
Yes.
And in that growth management ordinance, I remember doing permits that would count towards the maximum number of housing units that weren't in the growth management area. And what I remember is the growth management area was village residential and village residential 1 and 2, I think.
Was it commercial as well?
I don't believe so. We don't allow single families in a commercial zone. So I don't know, I mean, you can have a non-conforming residence, but we don't allow single families in a commercial zone. So I believe it was VR1 and VR2, but I can pull out that old ordinance and check before the next time, so when we have the discussion.
Be great.
I think that would have helped, that would have clarified it, because I think it was in that ordinance. I don't know if any of you remember the growth management ordinance, but it was a very controversial ordinance because it was, the formula for it was, it would end up being 0. You couldn't build anywhere. So we got rid of it when it got down to 6 houses. So I think you must remember that.
I do.
So I just don't remember the language that specific right now,
Yeah.
but I'll check for the next meeting.
Sure.
Because I think that'll clarify a lot for you.
So, does anyone have any questions before we move forward? So before I keep talking about the process for how we're going to do this?
Just that the growth areas are designated on this zoning map, say that the VRI commercial and industrial. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be commercial C and I industrial.
Correct. So we're talking about areas, because this is a zoning map, but we're talking about areas other than VR1 and VR2, according to this, that are growth areas. Am I wrong?
You can have, like, it's okay for a commercial or industrial area to be part of a growth area because it doesn't just have to be about housing. It's about where you're investing infrastructure, utilities, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. So if we're developing a village, it would seem like it'd be crazy if we didn't have it and basically organized the same way as where the residentials are going to be. If we're going to put a road and a bypass and have shops and commercial and industrial, maybe light industry or something like that involved in it. I guess, not to belabor it, but I'm just confused over exactly what is designated. When I went through the 1991 and the 2024 verbiage of the
2004, you mean? Yeah.
2004, I mean, there was no specific that I read that said, "Yep,
this is growth area."
That's what our growth area is. So.
Yeah, it wasn't done in the typical way in 2004.
And I do anticipate, as you suggest, that there's probably going to be legal challenges as far as growth areas down the road. So I would think that to position ourselves, we need a clarity as far as what those growths are. More so, the growth zone is more now than ever before. So it maybe in 2004 it wasn't as essential. There wasn't this legislation pending, but there is now. And so the verbiage, I believe, is going to be important going down the road.
Can you back up, Kate, to that slide that had the example spacing and Kayla, you started?
What? Sorry, what?
That one there.
Yeah.
So let's say we got the growth area. Let's say it's 2 acres. Just to walk this one through.
But I think it just has to be a conforming lot, right?
I'm going to look at your zoning thing.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's, so, I mean,
Yeah.
if we're mostly rural and most of these are 2 acres, then that's
a conforming lot.
That's a conforming lot. But if you have a village residential and that is a smaller lot size and it's a conforming lot, that it would not be 2 acres.
So
that's how I understand.
Yeah.
That, I mean, that I would think would drive growth. It's like, well, if I can, cram 1 more or 2 more units in this lot, what's my margin for development?
I'm just still trying to get a loose handle on it. You know, let's say that our growth area is 2 acres or less or something, and our rural is our current 3 acre rural residential. That's our current.
2 in rural residential.
2 in rural residential and
3
3 in rural, right? So let's say we're in rural residential. We've got a lot without a dwelling, and that 2 acre zone currently, for whatever reason, we map as growth area, designated growth area in this plan as we finalize it. LD 2003 would say where that would have been 1 dwelling on that parcel could now have 4
Yes. If you have all the
pieces in place.
sewer,
Yeah.
septic, wells, shorelands,
Sure.
every other thing in place.
And you would still need the more than 2 acres, right?
I might not be, so you don't have a minimum density per dwelling unit, right?
We have, yes, we do.
Okay.
For a dwelling, you need in any of these zones, what it says for
For,
the number of acres. So
Okay, so-
rural, you need 3, rural residential 2. In our ordinance, it says you can only have 1 principal structure per lot. So you can do a principal structure right now in a rural district and an accessory apartment
Yeah.
up to a certain size, and in Raymond, it's 700 square feet. You cannot build a duplex in a rural zone, a 2 unit, unless you have double the
So 4
acreage. You
acres.
need
Yep.
either 2 or 4, depending on which rural district you're in. Does that make
And
sense?
so, yeah, and so would 2003 override that? Well, the 2003, I mean,
You're allowed to keep your minimum lot sizes, you just can't, as long as they're in balance. So you couldn't say you need 2 acres for the first dwelling unit and 10 acres for the second dwelling unit. But you can say you need 2 acres per dwelling unit. So then if you wanted to build that 4-unit building, you'd need 8 acres.
Right, so like, let's say I have 10 acres in a growth area. I could put then up to
You could put 5.
I could put 5,
And
right?
you don't
yeah.
have to subdivide. It
Right.
could just be 1 lot.
Yes, and
with
so
5.
are we, well, would you
now,
have?
let me just go.
That's where it would be played out in courts, right? Because we have subdivision laws.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
an issue right now because that would trigger Maine State subdivision law. There's a thing in the legislature right now where they're trying to change that so that you wouldn't have to go through subdivision. But if you wanted to do this tomorrow, you would have to go through subdivision.
There's 2 types of subdivisions, a land subdivision
Mhm.
or a subdivision by dwellings.
Yep.
If you put a 3-unit building on 1 lot,
Mhm.
that's a subdivision because you got 3 dwellings.
Mhm.
That doesn't split the lot into 3 pieces, but you got 3 dwellings.
Right.
That's a subdivision. So that, they haven't
They haven't
quite
figured
figured
that
that
out
out.
yet.
Because triggering subdivision, then you're talking about a little bit more control over buffers and
Planning board
roads
gets
and
involved.
everything
Planning
else.
board's in, yeah.
But if in fact you can circumvent that, then you're really not required to do any of that stuff.
Are there, like, the critical rural? What is allowed in critical rural?
So there's a future land use map, it's not really prescriptive in that way. You're just sort of saying these places should have the most protection. I'll bring my thing back. These places should have the most protection from development. So this would guide you toward putting more protections on those land in your ordinance or in your zoning in the future.
So that critical rural may be our LLR 1 and 2 in the shoreline zone,
Mhm.
because you want to protect that more. Village residential would be your most, for the growth, the most change in investment probably. Just, am I right?
Yep.
I
So
think-
this is all intended to sort of guide future zoning, guide future investments, future town policy. If you're talking about building a new road, you want that to be in a growth area. There's some state funding that wants compliance with the comprehensive plan, so you can, apply for DOT funding and say this thing is in a growth area, so we're investing in it, that sort of thing. I think that it's important to understand how LD 2003 it is related to this, but it's also those specifics I think are going to be determined by town ordinances and probably by court cases. So we don't need to
get too tangled up
worry
in
too much about
2003.
that.
Yeah, but pay attention to it, certainly.
But we'll make a map that's compliant with the state statutes that can be used for LD 2003 in the future. Sound good? All right.
I think it's really smart of us to be kicking around the nuances in the background.
Yeah.
Because we're guaranteed we're grappling with this more than other comprehensive plan committees.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's good to understand, and it's also good, I think, LD 2003 has made more people aware that these things exist, so it's also good for you all to understand. So if you hear from a member of the community who's like, oh my god, I'm in a growth area, somebody's gonna build a giant building next door to me, you know, you kind of have that understanding that it's not, you know, not exactly.
Yeah, for instance, let's say we designated like Mill Street as a growth area. That could just mean we want a sidewalk there, right? Like we're just meaning that's where we want investment in growth or a bigger park or playground. So I think it is important that we iterate that and that the public knows that that could be what it means, not just a ton of houses.
Exactly. All right, so let's talk about how we make this map. So the process is that we're going to prepare 3 different scenarios for you that will have 3 different themes. What we're thinking about right now is a natural resources theme, a village focus, and a transportation corridors focus. And the idea of these scenarios is that it's not like you're going to pick A, B, or C. Each one will probably be a little too far, a little too much in one direction, and we'll present them all, and people can sort of pick what parts of them they like, what parts of them they don't like. You know, part of the natural resource focus map might be appropriate for one part of Raymond, and someone might like the corridors focus for another part of Raymond. So we're going to develop 3 different scenarios. Again, we'll bring those to you at the March committee meeting. The workshop, we will get public feedback on these. And based on that public input, we will develop a final future land use map for the committee to review. And I brought an example of the process we went through in Gray that I thought might be helpful for you all to conceptualize sort of how this comes together. So for Gray, we also had, I think we actually had 4 scenarios, but I only brought 3. Anyway, this is one of them where those black sort of blobs are growth areas. So this is a scenario where they looked at kind of a bunch of different crossroads almost, the main village, and then these 3 other crossroads as potential growth areas. Then they had another scenario where they had, instead of those sort of blobby, villagey bits, they had, what if all the main roads were growth areas? So that's what this scenario shows. And then another scenario where you have a village growth area, and then pretty much large blocks of the rest of the town in this dark green are all critical rural. So I hope this kind of helps you see like these 3 different scenarios of different ways you could potentially designate a town based on what we've heard so far, based on kind of what's there already. And then this is Gray's final future land use map. So they wound up doing a large village growth area around what we kind of know as Gray Village. And then kind of radiating out from Gray Village, they did some transition areas where there are like some areas of housing and development, but not as intensive as the village. And then they designated some critical rural around the edges of Gray. And then everything that's not labeled in here is just regular rural. Does that sort of help people understand how this works?
Could you flip back through those again?
Yeah.
Okay, just the.
That's your sort of little blobby crossroads and the village. Transportation, corridors, main roads, and then that's a natural resource focus one. And then what they settled on took a little bit from all three of those.
Yep. Yep. When you're drawing those maps, are you following lot lines?
Well,
To some extent?
Yeah. So gray was done before LD 2003 when we did not follow lot lines because this was just a framework and a piece of guidance. Going forward with what we've been working on now and what we'll do for Raymond, we will follow parcel lines to make Chris's life easier.
That'd be good for him to hear. Maybe he already knows
Yeah,
that.
that's all right. It'll be a surprise for him.
You don't want to tell someone that 1/16 of their lot is critical and the other rest isn't.
Yeah, that's I'm sure that's going to be another court case where someone has like 1/16 of their lot in a growth area.
And for current, this might be a little ahead of this, but for current developments that are looking to reference a comprehensive plan, and for towns like ours that have a comprehensive plan currently underway, I'm bringing this up because in the Wyndham Eagle there was the article about the solar farm going in, and they quoted the 2004 comprehensive plan, and I just, I think odds are, I didn't actually go back and review that plan to see what aligned, but in that case, if that does, I maybe the court will answer it, but this is a real-time example of a development that could be underway that would have implications within the next year or two before our plan is completed. But we would probably have a draft map out that this could be impacted by.
I think for developers and for the town to be sort of using this in the planning board process, it's typically after the state has certified the plan. Yeah. But yeah, so I think you kind of have to use the 2004 plan until there's a new plan.
I'm quite sure you're correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I have for your introduction to future land use. Happy to answer any more questions if anybody has any. But yeah.
I'm curious. Do you know if Gray has made any changes to their zoning maps based on this?
Do you know? I don't know. Gray's had a lot of back and forth, is my understanding, and some internal struggles.
There.
They've done a lot of great planning work also about like improving Gray Village, and I would love to see Gray Village get better, as I'm sure you all would as well. But so far, I'm not sure they've been able to do very much.
I don't think they did. I don't think they changed the zoning map.
I don't think so either.
Okay, you have a copy of our 2008 open space plan, 2007-8.
We have a copy of it. I haven't looked at it recently, so.
But that would hopefully inform the some of these maps.
Yeah, we can totally use that to inform the scenarios.
For the rural portions.
Definitely. Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah, I guess just as far as writing the future plan, land use plan, I would assume that the similar process will be that we're going to get input from the community on March 19th.
Mm-hmm.
And if I understand it, maybe wrong, but if a significant amount of the community came and said, we'd really like to see this area designated as a growth area, that would compel the plan to support that, correct?
Yeah, I think we have to take all the public input into account.
Sure, just curious, but that would be my sense. The logical step would be, we really can't finalize the future land use plan until after we've had at least this contact with the citizens. And then, of course, at the public hearing, people are going to have input as well.
Yeah, so at the March committee meeting, we're going to bring you some draft scenarios for the workshop. Then at the workshop, we'll do a presentation and then have opportunity for some activities for people to give input. And then we'll take all that and draft a future land use plan and map for the committee to help us refine.
I found a old yellow sticky here that I think I wrote after the workshop at the Jordan Small School, and hearing people and thinking about everything, and kind of came up with the idea of Raymond benefiting from 3 village centers, and East Raymond's one of them as a future plan. Certainly downtown is already there, but then having something at the at 302 end of Cape, just as 3 places that are and their own kind of sub villages, and they have places to gather, and that they have places to recreate, places to gather and eat. And so I don't know how that would fit in to the maps, and maybe some other folks in town will come up with a similar idea, but it certainly seems we have kind of three areas, three Raymonds in a sense. And this particular East Raymond area is in a position to accommodate its own village feel, I think, with this plan, and heard that from a couple people at the presentation on the 20th.
Yeah, if I can share something real quick that we were looking at recently too, because this is something we look at sometimes with making these maps, is this is the 1871 atlas of Cumberland County of Raymond, and you can see where there were village centers in 1871. So there's this kind of where Wyndham is, 302 is now. There's kind of a little group of stuff here right at the end of Raymond Cape. There's East Raymond up here. Sorry, hard to do while I'm sharing.
Look at that, a booming metropolis.
Yeah.
A lot of the historic buildings are, I feel like, in town.
And then there's even another North Raymond. You have a post office, a school, and one store up here.
I
So,
have
just
to wonder a little bit about just kind of thinking about pedestrian and recreation, like greenway type corridors that we could kind of keep in mind too. That wondering if we have a good network of snowmobile trails that run through town that connect from Raymond to Wyndham that people can use to get into town without being on 302. And I wonder if there are possibilities for kind of expanding those current networks to be multi-use rather than just snowmobile, if, like a greenbelt sort of a idea where, people could bike, to get into town. It's only a couple miles away, or, if there were sort of a network that we could explore through town that would give people options to be pedestrians and get from place to place without having to use some of the larger roads.
It's a great idea, and installing bike paths and is a pretty expensive proposition on active secondary roads, but what we're sounds like you're talking about, Jackie, is more working with the snowmobile trails and existing corridors.
Yeah, I mean, I just think we're limited in our ability to expand our roadways because of the lakes and the natural resources and everything that we have. So, how could we capitalize on maybe what's already in place, or alternatives to having to travel on the roads to be able to access different
Yep.
parts of town.
Yep.
We also don't have control over some of our major roads either, because they're state roads. So we can't, as much as we would want a sidewalk on 85, we can't just make that happen.
No, that's true, and actually, Maine DOT, on 85, since it's a main road, we would be responsible for paying a portion of that as well, so that's gets expensive as well.
Do we utilize much of TIF funds to be able to kind of encourage developers or investors to come and maybe incentivize them to come by offering TIF, tax relief sort of options that they could use towards capital improvement projects? Is that anything that we kind of?
I don't think we have, not that I'm aware of.
I think we used some TIF monies to do the sidewalk on Main Street.
Yes, we did for that.
I think that's also a staffing issue,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
Because you need staff to be doing a lot of outreach for that. And I don't think Raymond, and correct me if I'm wrong, has staffing that really is promoting our TIF district.
Outreach to reach developers or who's the staff outreaching to?
The staff would, developers, industry, anyone that could utilize the TIF money. I don't think we have staff or a department that has time and energy to
Pursue that.
make sure that, pursue it, make sure it's known.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to explore a bypass sort of a option where we had a major development project ahead of us, would it make sense to have a designated staff person that would kind of head that development, or is that?
Well, and these kind of questions are why the selectmen had wanted to get together with the comprehensive plan and the planning board. And I believe that's scheduled for now for either March or April, to see where the boards think there will be needs for staffing. Because right now, we have the staff to keep going what we're doing right now. We don't have a lot of extra staff sitting around wondering what to do with themselves, that they could pick up a major project like that and do it justice.
Right.
We might be able to make something limp along, but that's not really in the best interest of Raymond.
Well, and maybe too, since Wyndham has maybe this new 10-year plan of what their development is, do we have kind of a liaison where we're connecting with Wyndham to coordinate some efforts in development or growth and planning, maybe?
Your point is well taken. It's,
I'm just trying to throw things out there.
It's very important because that's one of the things we just mentioned, the staffing issue. We don't have an economic development person like Wyndham does.
Right.
And that would be the liaison, would be the economic development person. They have a staff of many more assessors and assessors helpers in Wyndham than we do here. We have Kurt and an assistant, and Kurt's only here, one day a week?
1 day a week, and she takes care of two
So
other
we don't
departments.
have the staff. So the liaison has always been town manager or code enforcement or a planner for these ideas. But I think point well taken. And if we're going to talk with the other boards, it's something that is probably a need. And while we're going through this, it may help us achieve our goals.
Could it be something that our comprehensive plan includes, is the recommendation to
Oh, certainly.
have something like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's one of the pieces I'm looking forward to seeing come out of this, is how we can expand town services and offer more for the citizens and businesses and other areas.
Okay.
Peter?
Yeah, so just a couple of things related to that. Number one is that at the last select board meeting, there was discussion by the finance director, basically suggesting that another revenue stream for the town that hasn't been tapped is grants. And the fact that really what was discussed was, well, you can't really assign that to anyone now. They are already over-assigned as it is.
Yeah.
But the discussion was, would it make sense to come up with resources to get a professional grant advisor, a writer, someone that can search these grants and get more of a revenue stream, new stream into the town. Secondly, just as far as the self-assessment checklist, the last entry under the future land use plan, under strategies, was that the comprehensive plan should direct a minimum of 75% of all new municipal growth-related capital investments into designated growth areas identified in the future land use plan. So as far as having some influence, and once again, the only influence we can really have is how the plan is worded and set up. But this is from the state checklist. And 75% is a significant amount of money, depending on what your growth-related capital investments budget is. So once again, it's a matter of looking at that, and that can certainly be included in the plan, that as it is a state requirement that we do that. And
Any other discussion on that?
I think that's all I had. If everyone feels like you know where we're going with future land use.
Do we need to discuss workshop planning at all tonight?
I think we are going to do that for the next meeting. This one should be significantly easier as it's 2 hours and more formal. I think again, some evening appropriate snacks, you know, maybe some chips or cookies or something we could do. Water. Chris wants popcorn.
Well, she started it.
Are we gonna do signs for this one? Is that what? Or no? I don't know.
I believe we discussed earlier that this is the one we wanted to really hammer in and try to get as much participation as possible. Is that correct? I think that's, from my recollection, we had talked about that we felt that this was more important to get input in from the public.
Well, and also every time we invest in getting more public there, we snowball it to the next event because we're going to collect emails there. So, you know, to a certain extent, we should be pushing it now. And we want to push it the final meeting, but, you know, I think we'll collect all the contact information for everybody who attends this meeting, and then they would understand the importance of attending the final one too.
This one's public safety building?
Yes.
Yes.
So there's a limit to how many folks can fit in that room, probably, I'd say.
And parking.
80.
49.
80 is a little high. 49 sounds like good. That's the number.
That's a lot smaller than I was.
That's what they told me today. I don't know if it's part of the room or if it's because they can wall that room off.
I've never been there, so.
Yes, it's bigger than this.
I think, you know, for a weeknight meeting, you know, if you get like 30 to 40 people, that would be really good.
Right.
We can look into, we'll do an online component again and either record our presentation or we'll just like pre-record it so we can put it on the website and get input from people afterwards as well. We did collect a lot more emails after the workshop, so hopefully that helped too. We can look into doing a Facebook ad too. Like those are pretty cheap, and you can actually set the amount you want to spend. So we can even say we only want to spend $10 on this. You know, they're really cheap. Like that's a reasonable amount of money. So we can look into doing that, maybe even before and after the event. So if people didn't get a chance to go, they can participate online.
Well, and once you develop an ad, we can get it put, or a version of it, so to speak, on our signs too.
Yeah, we'll get it on the signs. Do we have anyone who might help us get it in the Wyndham Eagle again?
I go.
I will.
Thank you.
Yeah, Frank's got
Frank.
Frank's got a
And
contact.
go in the town's portion. And that should be, actually, it would be this week she'd be working on it.
Okay. So you need something from me this week?
Yes. if you
All right,
would.
I can do that. So we'll follow up with these things kind of in between the meetings. But yeah, I think we'll be in good shape. I did want to, this is not related to future land use, but I did want to give a special thank you to Frank, who did some listening sessions with the residents at Jordan Bay Place and with the beautification committee leaders. So I don't want to put you on the spot, Frank, but I just wanted to thank you for volunteering to do that. It was very nice of you.
No problem.
Good job.
You wrote lovely reports that we will share.
Okay, so our next meeting date is March 6th. And now it's time for committee comment. And I don't know if Frank, you want to talk a little bit about your interview.
Well, I'll send copies of what I did to all the members.
Okay.
It was pretty enlightening, actually. I enjoyed both sessions. And I think we got some pretty good information as to what we need to do to look at both seniors and also for the beautification committee and what they've done in the past and what the problems are and the issues are to carry it forward.
Peter?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention that there is a bipartisan sponsored Senate bill, LD 2101, which is an act to strengthen shoreline zoning enforcement. And it's been referred to the Committee on State and Local Government, so they're going to be looking at it. And what this bill authorizes is a municipality to restrict, suspend, or revoke any issued permit to an owner of real estate who violates shoreline zoning ordinances. It also authorizes the municipality to place a lien against the real estate owner for all costs incurred by the municipality and any unpaid penalties related to the ordinance violation. So I just thought, for anyone who hasn't seen that, it's currently being studied. It was a bipartisan bill, and it was co-sponsored by Jessica Fay, our representative from Raymond. Yes, Chris?
Glad you brought that up. Alex and I went up yesterday to the State House, and I gave testimony in favor of LD 2101. That was somewhat spawned out of the support we got from the residents of the Cape. We had 280 signatures in favor of supporting the town's efforts in that enforcement action. So we had several nights at the Hawthorne House speaking, and Tim Nangle, the bill sponsor, and Jessica Fay participated in that, and they listened to us and they listened to the residents, and they did come up with this bill that is very well received so far. There was probably 80% of the people at the committee hearing yesterday were in favor, just a couple of people not in favor. So we'll see where that goes. It may need a little refinement, but it would allow us to lien a property, which would help expedite these cases that go on and on and on. And it would hopefully deter people from trying to buy a violation. You know, getting the $1 million view and only paying a couple $100,000 in fines, you still win. So basically, this bill would allow us to revoke permits, not issue permits, and lien the property until the violations are corrected. Now, I think they'll have to have some kind of a definition of what an egregious violation is. That hasn't been developed yet, but the idea and the concept is very good. And I was well received up there. It was good, and I think it's going to hopefully move forward.
Chris, so the lien wouldn't be based on the penalty damages themselves. It would be based on...
No, we just hold the land hostage until you come into compliance. But I think it would have to be, my thoughts are, and we did talk about this, but it hasn't been written into the bill, is the fact that we don't want to do that for every little homeowner that cuts a tree down on their waterfront property and by accident. And we don't want towns or municipalities or the land use commission to abuse it. So there'll probably be some way of maybe having the town selectmen or the council decide what properties get a lien and which ones don't. You know, you could have an overzealous code enforcement officer that just says we're going to lien everything till you clean it up. That's not what the intent is. It's for those big ones, and we'll see how that vets out.
Chris, can you, I don't know if you're able to, can you share what the 20% of people who were opposed to this?
Well, yeah, I can. Basically, it was the lumber industry, because they own so many parcels that are linked together. So if they had a major violation on, let's say, Little Wilson Pond up near Moosehead, and they own land, you know, 50 miles away on another, but they're all interlinked because it's Plum Creek or some other large landowner, they don't want it to be punitive to them. So there's going to be some back and forth on that.
So it sounds like residents.
But residents of the lakes and people that have witnessed these violations, they were all in favor of it. It was basically two groups, the Woodland Association, I don't know the technical names of them, but they were both Woodland.
Forest Council. Probably.
Yeah, yeah. One was an attorney and one was just a spokesman for one of the Woodland groups.
Thanks for doing that, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks for making that trip.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah.
And he did a fantastic job.
Great.
The committee actually listened and kept him there past his 3 minutes and kept asking questions.
Yeah, I was up there about 10 minutes.
Yeah. So, and that shows they were very interested, and most of the committee members really seemed
Genuine.
genuinely impressed and like they were concerned about this.
Hopefully it'll give us some teeth.
If anybody's looking for something to do on March 26th, JPCOG is holding a housing summit at Ocean Gateway in Portland. I think it's free to the general public, so if you have nothing to do, and they're going to talk about housing challenges and what other people have done in the area. Sean?
Can we start thinking about our next tour? I know it's a little cold right now, but coming up in the spring, maybe another. We did sea and land. Let's do it by air.
I'm in.
Oh, you got an airplane?
We can
You
rent
have
one.
a drone?
Yeah, how big is your drone?
I got a new drone, but unfortunately it doesn't lift. Committee will lift us all.
Seven.
So what didn't we look at that you want to see?
I mean, we really covered a lot. Is there any?
Should we go for a hike?
No, we could do something like that. We haven't explored any
Well,
more nature.
I was going to say we could hit a couple of the nature trails like over at the town forest and then the inland fisheries and wildlife land.
Cool.
And there's some areas on the Cape that are pretty cool too, that are pretty wild.
It'd be really helpful to hit up those places and have discussions like we did with Loon Echo Trust at the same time to understand what the options are for each location so that we can really plan to make the most use and protect the public access to recreate in those spots.
And those places are established, and our mission on this plan will be to probably target a couple new ones.
To connect.
And that are perhaps connected with a trail to the forest, the community forest or to Morgan Meadow. So it'd be good to have that vantage point for folks that haven't been up to the forest or around the meadow. But this would benefit after our workshop, certainly, right? We're talking springtime.
Definitely.
Hear some more input on land use, and then arrange some visits. I mean, there's some big spaces in North Raymond Gay Brook watershed that flows into Raymond Pond that is the headwaters for all our lakes, really, our small lakes. That's a large parcel and a good, it has some good adjacency to the Raymond Community Forest. There's some snow machine trails, I think, that go up into that area. So that would be a good one to look at. It would be hard to get in there even in the summer. I think there's not really any formal trails up there now. There are, but they're kind of rough. But I think a good look at least the roadside drive-by is instructive. We're going down North Raymond Road and looking up at the tower. There's a vast landscape up there that's undeveloped, except for the tower.
What's interesting about that, John, is we have a local resident that is buying up large parcels in North Raymond and has offered the town some use of some of them, and some of them are large enough to connect.
Good to know.
There's a parcel that goes all the way to the top of Black Cat Mountain and all the way down to the backside of Spiller Hill.
Yep.
And I'll be glad to map some of that stuff out. And he's quite willing to allow it to be used. He just wants to preserve it.
Right.
In a couple months, it will be vernal pool season.
Yes, and go look at salamander eggs.
Yeah, we can go count salamanders.
And fairy shrimp.
Mosquito eggs.
Peter?
Just an observation as far as the, I know that there's been discussions, Chris was very informative in the discussion that the select board was entertaining impact fees. I know we talked about it here on the comprehensive plan. It seems that there was some interest in looking at that. Also, the representative from Luneco mentioned them as far as dedicated funds from impact fees that can do such things as build more conservation or put more money into a conservation fund for the town to buy up properties and then conserve them. At the last select board meeting, there was a discussion about impact fees. It did not sound that at this point in time the select board has an appetite for them. I kind of was a little confused because one of the selectmen kind of misquoted me. I did not say that impact fees should be discounted entirely because they cause houses to be less affordable. I think that really my point was that, and I believe the speaker from Luneco was saying, used impact fees that are used in a very thought through application could be such things as being used to incentivize developers by waiving the fee. Or in fact, there was this conversation that, well, you know, it's not a one-time fee, impact fees. And I believe that discussion, I could follow that and it made sense. If in fact what you do is you pay an impact fee or something about, you make an improvement on your property and that then raises the real estate value, that then you're paying for that forever through your real estate taxes. I personally thought that was a bit of a stretch, but I believe that if and when we have this meeting, a combined meeting with the planning board and the select board, that would be something to explore as far as along with things like grant writing. Is there an opportunity to use impact fees with a scalpel rather than a meat cleaver that can not necessarily raise the overall cost of the home over time, and have that money, dedicated money, go to things like purchasing more open space and recreational areas and stuff like that. So that was just my thought as far as the discussion at the select board meeting. In that same meeting, I think one of the select board members said, but what we need is more revenue streams to buy up property, to preserve it. Well, you know, so here's a potential to do that.
Anybody else? All right, I think that concludes our meeting for the night.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, everybody. Good night.